don't we go over at least the rares in the colors that are both lands and spells? I mean, dual lands are just dual lands. We don't really need to talk about them too much. So let's pull up the list here. And the first one we start with is Amaris Call. So it's 4 and 3 white sorcery. Create 2/4/4 angels. Seems okay for 7 mana. That's a little heavy. But the second sentence is the important one. Non-angel creatures you control gain indestructible until your next turn.
Wow.
Playable or not?
Yeah, very. I mean, this is exactly the sort of thing that I'm talking about here. Is this could replace a land in your deck? And again, don't everybody go and make your entire deck tap lands. That's a bad idea. But
right.
As long as you aren't already like overloaded with tap lands, this is replacing a plains, and suddenly you have a massive game-swinging play on turn 10 or whatever, or you played it as a plains somewhere along the way. I actually think this card would be fine without that second rider. That second rider is just gravy. It's a very strong gravy, but
right.
Like making 2 angels, yeah, it's not the best thing in the world, but it's better than nothing. It's sort of the it's the Lutri theory. Like we've often said that Lutri has to be banned because the cost is 0.
Right.
And so it's sort of the same thing here. It doesn't matter how meh the card is, it's better than a land on turn 10.
Right. But
I
think by some extension that you're probably going to have other things you want to play. The only time that you're like really excited to peel this when you don't, when you're hellbent, is that you literally have nothing else to play.
Yeah, absolutely. But yes, and then you throw on the indestructible rider, which is crazy powerful. And
right, and of course that's again until your next turn. It's not just on this turn. It's a trip around the table, and that's super important.
Yeah, I mean, spoiler, that card will go straight into Heliod.
Right,
it's everything Heliod wants to do.
All right, the other rare in white is Kazandu Inversion. 6 white, destroy all non-land permanents.
Also goes straight into Heliod.
Right. So it's basically planar cleansing for 2 more mana, except one fewer white. But for 2 more mana, that has the land on the backside. Again, you're playing this?
Yes, absolutely. This will go into Heliod. It blows things up early on. I mean, Heliod right now runs like 18, 19 planes.
Right.
The deck has it's monocolored, so there's no that comes into play tap duels or anything like that.
Right.
Like Memorial to Glory is in there. There's probably 1 or 2 tap lands. Having 1 or 2 more tap lands in that deck is not going to be much of a downside. Having another Wrath and another source of creature tokens and indestructibility, those are big upsides.
Yeah, it's fair. I think I would play both of the white spells. Just, again, slot them as a land, and then if you happen to get to play the spell, it's going to make your deck, so you play 2 of these spells, it's going to make your deck list look weird, because now you're running 35 lands as far as the front face is concerned, whereas you actually have access to 37.
Right.
So in blue, the first one is Glasspool Mimic. You can have Glasspool Mimic enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature you control, except it's a shapeshifter rogue in addition to its other types. Now, this is a clone for your own stuff, but it only costs a blue and 2. Playable?
Yeah, I mean, it's a clone that costs blue and 2. The clone that costs blue and 2 is a pretty playable card anyway.
Right.
I mean, that, even setting aside, does it have a land on the back? This is one of the more, I guess, aggressively costed cards here.
Yes. Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, it's very playable. This one actually, I could see being more of a, replaces a spell in your deck and has a random upside of if you need a land, you need a land.
Yeah, I'm at 3 mana. It's hard for me to imagine that if I draw this in my opening hand, that I want to play it as a land. Because it's right there. I'm going to want to clone something right away. Right?
If your hand is 2 land and this card, it's a snap keep.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, But the fact that you can only clone your own stuff, that's fine because you're putting good stuff in your deck in the first place.
Ideally.
Yeah.
The one downside of cloning your own stuff here is that, wraths and stuff are prevalent in the format. So you are setting yourself up to be a little bit blown out. But, 3 mana clone.
Right. The 3 mana clone. I think that's all we need to say. Other one is Seagate Restoration. 4 and 3 blue. So the mythics are expensive, it seems. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand, +1, and you have no maximum hand size the rest of the game. What do you think?
It's probably win more. I will put it in some decks somewhere because it's exactly the kind of win more I like.
Right.
This strikes me as the spell that you want to put in the trade routes deck, where
right.
you aggressively play this card early on as a land, and then try to pick it up later on for the big impact.
Trade routes being blue after all.
Yes, exactly. So, I think this one will see less play from my perspective, but I mean it's a giant, huge, monster impacting spell late in the game, and that's worth something. Whether it turns out to be just too much work for you were winning anyway, or if it's actually like this spell doesn't pull you back. Like the advantage of say the White Wrath or even the white, either of the white ones is if you were behind, you may no longer have been behind. This spell, if you were behind, you're probably dead.
Right, so, because you spent 7 mana in order to just draw the cards. Now you need more to do stuff.
It's a sorcery, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, you spent 7 mana on your turn. Didn't keep up. You aren't keeping up counter spells or anything useful or any other instance. This one's just. It's just the power of the front side is questionable. It is definitely impactful, and there will be some decks where it belongs. But I don't see this being quite as good as the white ones.
Well, if you're playing Psychosis Crawler, it becomes a kill spell, right?
Sure. Yes. There are all sorts of shenanigans you can do with Psychosis Crawler.
Right. Yeah, what's the number of cards for 7 mana, a 7 mana sorcery? What's the number of cards that you want to draw where you feel like you're at least getting value? 7. Wow.
I mean, as a sorcerer, as an instant, I would be willing to go a lot lower, but 7 for a sorcery.
Yeah. Okay, in black, we have Agadeem's Awakening. X, black, black, black. Return from your graveyard to the battlefield any number of target creature cards that have different converted mana cost X or less. This has got to be saucy, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is what you want. Like I said, this is where early on it's a land. Late game, this is a massively impacting card, both if you're behind or ahead. This one will go straight to Tasker.
Yeah, you have especially since you probably have some sort of curve that you've cast on early. You've cast your 3, 4, 5, 6, and when board wipe happens, I mean, it's 9 mana to get all that back, but still, putting 4 cards back onto the battlefield with no chance of the other players getting stuff like with a Living Death or a Patriarch's Bidding.
Yeah, no, this card will turn games around. Like I would consider this card. It's probably not quite good enough for just its front face, but with the added ability to just play it as a land when you need a land, I think this is a highly impactful card.
All right, the second one is Hagra Mauling. Spell costs 1 less to cast if an opponent controls no basic lands. I think that's a nod to the Commander format a little bit. It costs 4, black 2. So as an instant, destroy target creature. Again, aren't you going to choose better options here?
No, I think this is one of these primo examples of a card where the incremental value is really good. Drawing a removal spell late, even a slightly overcosted removal spell, is very good. I mean, obviously it's not going to have the impact of like the previous card, but it's strong utility on a card where, if you think about it as I'm usually going to play the land and every once in a while it's a removal spell, I think that's really good. That's really good value. I don't know that it's not going to go into. I mean, it's not going to go into every deck or anything.
Right.
But if I'm playing a black deck and feel like I have space for a couple of tapped lands to go into it, this is pure upside, and removal is always valuable.
Removal is always valuable to me. I mean, it's just a 1-for-1, and you and I know that in Commander, 1-for-1s aren't often all that great.
Yes and no. I find that I'm actually liking 1-for-1s a little more.
Really?
Maybe Buy a Box or Boxing League has affected this a bit.
Sure.
But you're correct that a 1-for-1 is generally not good for Commander, but it beats a 0-for-1, which is what happens if you just drew a swamp.
Yeah. Okay. Fair. I think it's a reasonable angle to look at it from. Like you, I don't think I'm jamming this into too many decks, though.
Yeah. No. I mean, it will have its place.
Yeah. Red gives us Shatter Skull Smashing. Red X. Deals X damage divided, and it's a sorcery. Divided as you choose among up to 2 target creatures and or planeswalkers. If X is 6 or more, Shatter Skull Smashing deals twice X instead. Damage to creatures.
Yeah, this is kill 2 creatures for a lot of mana as a sorcery.
Yeah.
I'm not particularly excited about this one.
I think we've hit our first whiff here.
Yeah, it will go in a deck occasionally where I'm like, I don't have anything that I'm like, if I end up with a deck like this would have gone to my Atali deck where I had 25 mountains, because there I could afford 1 tapped land, sure, whatever. But sure. Yeah, I'm not gonna be like, how do I fit this into a deck or anything? It's just the payoff isn't there.
The other red is Valakut Awakening. It's an instant for a red and 2. Put any number of cards from your hand onto the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards +1.
I can definitely see this getting use. It's essentially, and this is one where late game, you're holding 3 land in hand because you've got land flooded early, or you've got spells you're like, these are not very valuable, I'm getting a lot of this. It replaces itself, which is actually very unusual for these type of red cards. Usually these type of red cards, you end up down a card essentially, or it's one of the ones where you draw 7. But usually with this sort of rummaging, you end up down a card. Here you're not ending up down a card, and that actually makes it pretty compelling. This is one where the front side is possibly worth it, just almost worth it for its own value, and then the back side is a mountain.
Right. Well, it's wheeling for you if you need it, if you're playing Nekusar or something like that.
And
or,
that.
Again, our friend Psychosis Crawler. If you're playing your Mind Moil deck or something,
which I have been known to do.
Right. Some utility, again, I agree with the point. This is way better than drawing a land late, because you have opportunity to do something with it. Onto the green. The creature is Kazandu Mammoth. It has landfall. It's a 3/3. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, Mammoth gets +2/+2 kill end of turn. Sort of vanilla, not particularly exciting.
Yes and no. I believe, if I remember rightly, what's it cost?
It costs 3.
That's pretty cheap. That's early game. That's a 5/5 on most turns for 3 mana. Admittedly, a vanilla 5/5, it's not going to set the world afire, but it's actually reasonably costed. That's an aggressively costed card. That one I think actually might see some tournament play. We're in a weird standard right now where everything is ridiculously powerful. In a traditional standard, I think this card would have been, you go back a few years, this card would have actually, I think, been quite impactful.
Yeah, obviously you play Evolving Wilds and this thing's suddenly a 7/7.
Yeah, exactly. So it has potential, I think, across a lot of formats. 5/5 vanilla and Commander, not that compelling. Might not make the cut all the time, partly because of what the other green one does. We'll get to that now.
Right.
But I can certainly see this making decks.
So the other green one that Toby's talking about is Turn Timber Symbiosis. It, like many of the other ones, costs 7, 4 and 3 green. It's a sorcery. Look at the top 7 cards of your library. You can put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield. If that card has converted mana cost of 3 or less, it enters with 3 additional +1 counters on it, and then put the rest on the bottom.
Yeah, that's already at least one deck.
So it doesn't. It's never a whiff, right? If you're playing any of the ones that look at the top X cards and put one onto the battlefield, when the only card in there is Elvish Visionary, you spent a lot of mana for nothing. Well, a card, but still.
Mm-hmm.
With this ability that puts the counters on it, now suddenly you've got something that's a little more compelling.
Yeah, I actually think that I really like that part of the design. It's acknowledging that the feel bads on this card when you hit an Elvish Visionary are high.
Mm-hmm.
If you hit a much larger Elvish Visionary, it's still not amazing, but it's still it's a lot better. And this card to me is very much what I was talking about earlier. Is this is a land a lot of the time, but late game this is a nice let's go and get something out of my library. That's, 7 cards even in Commander is pretty deep.
Mm-hmm.
Unless odds are unless you've built a really weird deck, you're gonna hit something, and with the extra rider, you're gonna hit something which has board presence.
Right. And if you're playing a +1 counters deck in the first place, now you have you get a spike feeder with this.
Yeah.
And you get 3 additional +1 counters on it,
mm-hmm.
or you just got your Phantom Neshoba anyway, so that's fine.
Yeah.
You don't underestimate the value of playing the little library manipulation and then playing this.
Yeah, I mean, I think this card, if it was just this card without the land on the back, I don't think I'd consider it very often.
Uh-huh.
But when you think of it as a land with this upside, this is serious upside.
Right.